Patriots Podcast. I hope y'all doing all right today. I'm doing pretty good. I'm joined by a very special guest, somebody I've looked up to for a good while now, doing their part in the podcast industry. We're in the sports media world. I'm joined by Nick Cattles of the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to meet up with you and have a conversation tonight. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir, man. Yes, sir, man. Just want to start out, man. Some news came out today with Josh McDaniels. Got fired. Him and Ziegler got fired today by the Las Vegas Raiders. Well, late last night, early in the morning. What's your thoughts on that? And do you think it's a chance he'll be back with the Patriots in the future?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of a surprise that it happened when it happened, just because the reports are that Mark Davis had told McDaniels that he had at least through the rest of this year, if not through next season as well. So those conversations obviously did not change the dynamic. But overall, look, Josh McDaniels hasn't been a good head coach. He wasn't good when he was in Denver. He wasn't good in Vegas. He struggled with a lot of simple, seemingly situations coaching wise. He struggled in Denver with the locker room, and then he goes to Vegas and he struggled with, clock management, in-game operation, decision making. So he just wasn't good at the job. And so it's tough to defend somebody who's not good at the job that they're doing. That kind of happens, right? I mean, if you're not good at your job, I'm not good at my job, there's a risk that you're going to get fired. So I don't think it was shocking that he was let go. It was the fact that he was let go when he was. And really, Ken, the biggest issue I had in Vegas is just there was mixed messages. Like, I'm not really sure what they were trying to accomplish. Are you trying to rebuild and reset, or are you trying to win? Because when you go out and you sign Chandler Jones and you go out and you end up, trading for Devontae Adams and giving the contract to Adams that they did, and when you replace Derek Carr with not a young quarterback, but you replace him with Jimmy Garoppolo, seems like you're trying to win now. And so if it was a rebuild, they didn't go about it the right way. So that's the first thing. Second thing about the Patriots, of course, I think there's definitely a chance that Josh comes back here to New England. I mean, if you look at the history, right, Bill Belichick usually stands by his guys unless you're somebody like Eric Mangini, who he feels, wronged him. But, he tends to stand by his guys. It's kind of the Belichick family. And don't forget, Josh McDaniels has lots of money coming to him from Vegas. So the Patriots never shy away from hiring somebody who they don't have to necessarily pay. Mm-hmm. So I do think that it's a possibility. Is it probable? I'm not sure. It's up to Josh. It's up to his family and what they want to do.
I think it'd be interesting if he was to come back this year in the future. What happens with Bill O'Brien? I've seen some rumors that he might got a job line up at Michigan State or Michigan, I heard or whatnot. So it'd be interesting to see if the Patriots do bring in Josh McDaniels and maybe even Ziegler for like a general manager role or executive role. Because, he was there. I think he was the higher up to Matt Grove before last time he was with the Patriots. So it'd be very interesting if they do bring those two back in or bring one of them back in. And the Raiders did fire Mick Lombardi, the offensive coordinator, day too. So a lot of interesting things going on there with the Raiders. So it's gonna be very interesting to see what happens there, Nick and whatnot. I want to move on right here to the Patriots. Patriots. See, what's your take so far on the season so far? I know it's a lot. I've been watching you and Greg podcast, and Greg's funny, man. I got to get Greg on with talk with me, man. But he keeps it real. I like that. But what's your take on the Patriots season so far?
Well, obviously it hasn't been good, right? I think if you looked at some of these games and you could try to justify, oh, well, this could have happened, that could have happened. That's really been the case for this team for the last couple of years. They just haven't been able to get out of their own way. I even thought the game in Miami, how many drives were wasted by penalty flags? How many drives were wasted by, first down, loss of yardage? The first play of the game, you throw a swing pass to Pop Douglas, you lose 4 yards. 2nd and 14, you feel like the drive is already over. So the offense is obviously not as good as many of us thought that it would be. I did not think it was going to be an elite offense. I did not think it was going to be, top 5. I wasn't even sure if it was going to be top 10. I thought it'd be respectable. And it's one of the worst offenses in the league. And I think there's a combination of things. The offensive line has been banged up. They've been constantly shuffling the guys up front, which is very difficult to do. Ramondre Stevenson did not look like the same guy from 2022 in the first 7 weeks. He looked better last week. He had stronger finish to his runs, which was nice to see. But Ramondre hasn't been the same guy. Juju replaced Jacoby Myers, and he's on one leg right now.
I knew that was going to be a bad contract when it came out. I seen it when it came out. I just said that has disaster written all over it.
See, I was okay with it at the time, Ken, because I didn't know he was that hurt. If you told me that he was that hurt, I obviously would not have liked it. I didn't have that information at the time. A healthy Juju Smith-Schuster is a pretty good football player, and I thought he would bring yak more than Jacoby Myers did. He's a little bit more explosive than Jacoby, but at the end of the day, the Patriots failed. They failed with that medical. He has to go through a medical. He's got to go get through a checkup, and they decided to sign him, which looks like a massive mistake, especially when you're replacing somebody like Myers. So, and Mac, I think, I know you want to get into Mac a little bit deeper. Yeah, I think there's reasons why Mac is not playing well. But I think we're at the point now where he's somewhat shattered. I don't want to say completely broken because he played as well as he did against Buffalo, but I think there's been a number of things that have really kind of crippled him. And I don't know if he's going to be able to come back from it. And the more he plays like he played last week, it doesn't feel like he's going to be able to turn that corner and get back to that guy that we thought he could be, in the middle of his rookie season.
Speaking of Matt, that's exactly where we was going next. I follow you on Twitter, whatnot. You don't follow me back yet, but hopefully after this,
I'm sorry, man. I'll do that when I get off of here.
Yes, sir. I follow you on Twitter. I know you're kind of big on Mac, and you've had your criticism of him too, but you've made kind of consistent about Mac. That's what I like. I see you go back and forth a lot with a lot of fans on Twitter. How much better do you think Matt would be if see, this is my thing with the Patriots. I think they put themselves in a bad predicament this year. If you'd went out this offseason, signed D-Hop, made a couple of trades or addressed wide receiver in the draft or brought back Jacoby Myers, and if Matt was playing the same way he's playing right now, then you'd have a clear-cut answer. Okay, he's not the guy. Now you kind of put yourself like in the middle, like he's not the guy, but maybe if we had this, he would be we might have a good clue if he's the guy. Now the Patriots are in a position they're kind of stuck. A lot of people, some of the fan base in the media might say, well, he's not the guy, and even if he had top talent, they don't think Mac would be even better. Where do you stand on the Mac Jones criticism, and how much better you think it would be if, let's just say, instead of Juju, Parker, and Douglas and Kendrick Bourne, you have a D-Hop, Jerry Jeudy, and another number one wide receiver. If Mac had what Tua has in Miami, or what Joe Burrow has in Cincinnati, how much better do you think Mac Jones would be?
I think he'd be better. Certainly. I don't know if he'd be a top 5 or 10 guy. Coming out of Alabama, and I watched him play a lot at Alabama, a college football fan. I thought he would be somewhere between, the 12th to 15th quarterback in the league. If you're trying to rank the guys, I thought he would be, slightly above the middle of the pack. I never thought
Tannehill, something like that.
I never thought, Ken, that he was going to be an elite player. I never thought that he was going to be, again, considered a top 10 quarterback. He doesn't have elite traits. He doesn't have any elite physical tools. So it's really difficult in 2023 to be that kind of quarterback and be a top, 5 to 10 guy. That leads you to kind of the Tua conversation, right? Because Tua has a lot of the same kinds of tools that Mac has. Right. The difference is 20 games or so into Tua's career, the Dolphins looked around and said, we're doing this wrong. And we have a defensive-minded coach from New England as the head coach. He's not getting along with the young quarterback from Alabama. We have, Devontae Parker as this guy's number 1 receiver. We have Mike Gesicki as one of his top weapons. I think you can kind of look at this and say, man, there's a lot of similarities to how New England handled him, right? The offensive system in Miami when Tua first got there was Chad O'Shea. He was a coach from the Patriots. That's the offensive scheme that he was running. And Miami changed. They went out, they got Mike McDaniel. They completely overhauled the staff. They drafted Jalen Waddle. They invested in Tyreek Hill by trading for him and then giving him that big fat contract extension. They brought in a number of explosive, fast running backs that fit the scheme from Mike McDaniel. And you saw, and they also worked on their offensive line. Their offensive line, when Tua first got into the league, you go back to the beginning of his career, Pro Football Focus had Miami as a bottom 5 offensive line in the league. So they worked on those things. They brought in Teron Armstead. They poured money into the offense. And really, Ken, that's the unfortunate part. I mean, whether you like Mac, hate Mac, love Mac, the unfortunate part of it is the fact that they had him on his rookie scaled contract and they completely mismanaged him. When you look around the league, you look at Justin Herbert, you look at Burrow, you look at Tua, You look at Jalen Hurts, you look at any of these young quarterbacks. What the teams do is they invest money and draft capital to support that quarterback. And the Patriots didn't do that. I mean, their answers were Nelson Aguilar and Devontae Parker and one-legged Juju Smith-Schuster. And their offensive line has been not good the last couple of years. So he's had 3 offensive coordinators in his 3 seasons. That is usually, an indication as to a quarterback that's not going to play well. I mean, you can go back.
It's been all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, you can go back in the day. You can look at any quarterback who didn't necessarily end up being who you thought they were going to be. I don't want to say a lot of those guys, but at least some of those guys were given different offensive coordinators throughout their early career. We're not given, the support of the offensive line. David Carr is a great one. He never had a chance because that offensive line murdered him, and he was shook. And I think we're at the point now, Ken, that Mac is shook. He doesn't trust what's in front of him. He doesn't trust what's around him. His head coach alienated him last year, according to Jeff Howe's report in The Athletic a few weeks ago. His head coach embarrassed him on national television, Monday Night Football against Chicago. The entire stadium's chanting for his backup quarterback. And I think Mac is one of those guys that needs some TLC. And I think that with Belichick was not going to necessarily support Mac publicly last year. And I think that affected him. So when again, would Mac end up being a good quarterback? I'm not telling you. He might have ended up right where he is right now if they handled him better. But we can't answer that question because they handled him so badly.
It's really good. I couldn't agree with you there more, Nick. I'm a big Mac Jones fan. Got his jersey better in the back. I just wish they would have built around him a lot more. But hey, man, it's tough right now. It's very tough for him right now. And they put him in a tough position, man. Moving on, still just a little bit on Mac. What is your expectation for the rest of the season? There's 9 more games. I got a few rookie. Look like Parker's probably gonna be out this week. Kendrick Bourne's already on. He's on IR with the ACL tour. Kayshawn Booty, maybe he gets on the field this week. You still got Pop. You got Taquan Thornton, Rager, Juju, and all them. You got some young talent. I think the rest of the season is you got to see what you got in the young talent. But I think, and I heard you say this on the podcast in the past, and I think me and you are 100% in agreement on this. The worst possible case scenario for this team is to mess around and win 6 or 7 games, mess up your draft position. And because right now you got 2. You got Washington this week, and we get into that game in a minute. You got Washington this week. Then you got you got the Colts in Germany. You got the Giants, and then I think you got your bye. You got you got the Chargers. You got a bunch more teams. You could probably you got 9 more games, but 6 or 7 should be wins if you play your best. You got 6 or 7 winnable games. But this year, this Patriots team is kind of tough to say that. But you got 6 or 7 winnable games. What do you think the team should do? I think the worst case scenario, the worst thing that can happen if they didn't mess around and win and go from right now picking top 5 to now you're picking 15, 16 to draft. You're kind of middling. You're in no man's land right now because like my buddy Evan Lazar said, you either need to have one of those guys like a Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, or you need to be terrible. You can't be middling. So what do you think? What is your expectation for the rest of the year? What do you think is probably going to happen?
Yeah, I appreciate Evan's work. He's really good at what he does. Yeah. Look, it's like one of those things where you're right and Evan's right, and I've talked about it. The worst place you can be in the league is purgatory. And if you win, 7-8 games, you're stuck in purgatory for another season. Now, if you were winning games and you were competitive against good teams, and Mac Jones was turning that corner and looking like a guy who could be your QB1 next year and building more confidence, then that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because you still have $100 million in cap space. You'd still have a top 15, 16 pick, but you would have a quarterback that you felt more confident in, and you were competitive against good teams, and you felt like this team was adding some momentum behind it. But right now, after last week's game against Miami, this team just doesn't compete enough against good teams. Mm-hmm. And they beat Buffalo 2 weeks ago. That was a good win. But look at, the wins they've had over the last couple of years. It's been against other bad teams, other mediocre teams, backup quarterbacks, et cetera, et cetera. So they have not been able to prove really since Brady. I mean, even when you go back to 2021, a lot of those wins in that playoff year were against not so good teams. They get to the playoffs, they get embarrassed by Buffalo. So, that's been the calling card post Brady. They have not been able to beat good teams. And if you're not able to compete against good teams when there's a talent gap as much as there was like against Miami, to be stuck in that middle is really the worst position you can be in. Now, I look at the schedule like you do, and I think there are some games. I think this weekend's game against Washington is one of those games, especially after they traded Sweat and Chase Young yesterday. You know, Washington is not a very good team. The Colts, I think the Colts could be a little bit, tougher. Minshew's playing decent football.
They can score.
Yeah, they can score. So, we'll see how, Indy plays in Germany. But yeah, then you've got a bye week. You've got the Giants. You've got the Broncos. The Patriots, if healthy, are good enough, quote unquote, to beat fellow bad teams, if that makes sense, right? They're not awful enough to lose, all of those games. They're good enough when healthy to win some of those games. So now you look at the health. And honestly, Ken, I don't know how they move the football. And Washington will be an interesting, case study, because what Washington doesn't do very well defensively is what the Patriots don't do well offensively.
Right.
Washington gives up a lot of big plays. They give up a lot of throws downfield. Patriots don't make a lot of big plays. They don't throw the football downfield well. So it'll be interesting to see how they match up. But I don't know how the Patriots will be able to move the football often. When you look at this year with Kendrick Bourne, the offense was so ridiculously inconsistent. Now you take Bourne out of that. I couldn't care less, honestly, about Parker being in a game or out of a game. I hope he gets healthy, hope he's fine. But he's been a big zero this year. That doesn't impact things that much. But the Kendrick Bourne injury does. I wonder if you'll see more Mike Gesicki this weekend, play him in the slot a little bit to take over some of Bourne's responsibilities. I would think Kayshon Boutte will get out there and play. He reportedly hasn't been great in practice, which was one of the criticisms of him at LSU, Brian Kelly. So, I think you'll see a lot of the young guys. They'll get opportunities. I don't think it's going to be sexy football by any means. And, we'll see how many fist fights in a phone booth they can win against some of these mediocre to bad teams.
Agree, man. Right here now, let's address the elephant in the room. Bill Belichick's future. What's your take on the contract extension, or was it a pay rate, whatever it was? How many more years you see Belichick with this team? And what's your take on his future?
If it continues to go the way it's going, I don't think he is going to be here in 2024. I don't think that Robert Kraft, after what he has said publicly, after, what has happened this season. I mean, I was at the Saints game. I paid to be there with my wife, and I sat in the crowd for that awful game. I think I left like right at the beginning of the fourth quarter to go tailgate more. I needed another beer or two after watching that game. So, if it's going like that, and there's no signs of hope. If you're not competitive against good teams, if you're losing against bad teams, if the quarterback continues to spiral out of control, there's really no reason to bring Bill back. And I appreciate what he did for the first 20 years or so of his career here in New England. I think everybody should, thank him for that. They should build a statue for him and Brady, all that stuff. But inevitably, Ken, it's like, what have you done for me lately? That's this business. And so, post Brady, they've been a below 500 team. They have not been able to, as I just said a few moments ago, to compete against good teams, right? So I don't foresee Belichick being here in 2024 if we're talking about a 5-win team, 6-win team. I think he's gone, and I think the time has come for him to go if that's the case. As far as the contract, what I can gather from what I've read and heard and seen, it certainly sounds like there's some semantics games being played. You could always say that somebody signed a multi-year agreement. My theory, and I don't know, I haven't talked to anybody about it with an inside word. My theory is that they probably ripped up a contract and gave him an additional year with maybe an option or something like that. That gets him through next season, 2024. I don't think they would have had him walk into a lame duck season, not after what he did for Kraft and what he did for this team. Kraft has made hundreds of millions of dollars off of Belichick. So I don't think they would have just, allowed him to walk in to a year where it's the last year of his contract. So to me, it always kind of read like they knew his last year was coming up, and they probably ripped up a deal and they gave him an extra year tacked on. Maybe they even gave him an option that the team can get out of in 2025. And that gave him some security. And they were hopeful that this year would be different than last season. And it hasn't been. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's as time goes on, they continue to play this way. It's more likely that it's a clean slate and he's gone completely from the organization than any kind of, oh, well, he might coach, but not GM. It's tough to believe that would be the case. He's still making the calls. He still made the calls at the deadline this week. So it's difficult for me to paint any kind of scenario where if you're winning 5 or 6 games and you're getting blasted by good teams, that he would come back. I don't see any logic behind that.
I mean, I think we both can agree. It's going to be an interesting offseason in Foxborough. From the offense, from just the personnel, every daggone thing. It's going to be an interesting because it's been all over the place, man. And you just hit the nail on the head. It's going to be an interesting offseason this year, man. Last question before we get you out. Last topic. Your offseason storyline. You might have just gave me a tease right there with the Belichick news or whatnot. But anything else you're looking forward to in the offseason storyline? And also, if we do have a top 5 pick, should it be a quarterback? Did you get Marvin Harrison? That's a 2-part question. What's your take on that?
Yeah, if you can get a quarterback, if you're in the top 5 and you're positioned to land a generational quarterback, if you feel like that guy could be generational, whether it's Caleb Williams or it's Drake May. I know you're in North Carolina, so I'm sure there's a lot of Drake May talk in North Carolina.
I like Drake.
He's a big guy, big frame, good arm, good athlete, strong. But if you're talking about somebody who is, again, that kind of generational guy who gives you the opportunity to have a top 5 to 10 quarterback on your roster, you got to pick that guy. You got to take the guy because you're never guaranteed to get a swing at that guy again. So if you're in position in the top 5 to either, move up a couple of spots, I think you'd have to take one of those 2 guys. Maybe you like somebody else, maybe you like a McCarthy, maybe you like a Penix, maybe you like a Ewers, maybe you like one of those other quarterbacks. But I think you got to be sold. If you're taking a quarterback, especially that high, you've got to be sold that guy is surefire, no doubt, going to be the dude. So if you have the opportunity to land one of those guys, you do it every day of the week. And then you pivot from Mac and you trade Mac and see what you can get for him in the offseason. If one of those guys doesn't exist, if you can't get one of those guys, then I think you got to look at offensive tackle or wide receiver. I know it's kind of old school of me, but I always tend to lean towards offensive tackle versus receiver because I just think it's easier to find a receiver than it is to find a bona fide all-pro kind of tackle.
And I actually think the Patriots I think they do good hitting them later on in the draft with wide receivers. We'll see about Kayshon Boutte, but I think they hit on Pop Douglas.
Yeah, Pop. I like Pop. I feel good about Pop. But, yeah, so I think if you have one of those top picks and you feel like if you have a chance at one of those top quarterbacks, you take them. If not, then I think you still look at quarterback later in the draft. There's no rule against drafting a quarterback in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round that you might feel is good. 5th round. There's nothing against, drafting a young quarterback in those middle rounds and having that guy compete with Mac Jones for the starting job next year. And then you evaluate the quarterback position. I don't think you draft a guy just to draft a guy. So the quarterback position is the biggest question. Do you go veteran? Do you go, top pick? How do you do it? Do you combine that a little bit with draft and Mac and set up a competition? To me, if you don't have that pick at the top of the draft and you don't have a shot at May or Williams, then to me, you draft a younger quarterback in the middle rounds. You bring that guy in. You see how he does in camp. You have a competition. If he beats Mac, great. If he doesn't, then you roll with Mac again and surround him. I mean, you got $100 million. You should have, some good picks coming up this year. I wish they traded a couple of guys and got more draft capital this week. I thought that was a big miss from them. But you have the draft capital. You've got the money. So you can surround Mac and see what happens. And, it's a tough thing because, again, you don't want to necessarily bottom out. It's difficult to do that. but you've got to find a solution at quarterback, whether that's Mac with better weapons next year and he figures himself out with a new coaching staff, or, you draft a guy in the middle rounds and he beats Mac out and then he surprises people, or you find that stud at the top of the draft.
I cannot wait till the interesting offseason is going to be. Look, hey man, Nick, I'm sure you're going to agree with me here. I just hate that this is the bad news for us. I hate we got to suffer through another 9 more games of this season and seeing what this team's going to do, and with that terrible product they've been put on the field. I just hate we got to go through that for a couple more months. It's not even Thanksgiving, and we already talking about the March free agency, the draft, combine, and all that stuff, man. So I hate we got such a long time till we can get into some of the fun stuff, because we already know what this season probably going to be. But
it's tough to sit through this kind of a season and know that unless they shock us, there's not much going on the rest of this year other than maybe beating some bad teams.
Yeah, man. Hey, I appreciate it, Nick, man. Let everybody know where they can find you at.
Yeah, Nick Cattle Show podcast. It's on YouTube. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Pods. That's a solo project I do. If there are any Celtics fans out there, Cattle's on Causeway is a podcast that I do that's exclusively Celtics. And, of course, as you've mentioned a couple times here, I do the Greg Bedard Patriots podcast with Greg twice a week in season. We've been doing that for a few years, and we have a lot of fun doing it. So that's where people can find me, and on X at Nick C Radio. And I got to follow my guy here because I didn't realize I wasn't following him yet.
Yes, sir. Hey, Pats Nation, I appreciate y'all joining me and Nick tonight, talking about the Patriots' future, the Patriots' season so far. Also, if you just tune in, if you go tune in later on, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube, follow me on IG, follow me on Twitter. Also, Cash App, if you want to support the show, you can also do that. Hey, man, I appreciate it, Nick. It was a great show tonight. Let's get it.